and the European Court of Human Rights are our most important instruments for achieving this. This is why we believe it's essential to ratify Protocol 14 so that we can move ahead with the reforms required to make the Court more efficient. The responsibility for the effective functioning of the Convention systems lies with the 47 member states of the Council of Europe collectively. Ratification of Protocol 14 by the Russian Federation remains of key importance for protecting the Court against an excessive workload, and I, once again, urge the Russian Federation to ratify the protocol. A large number of individual applications have come in to the Court linked to the conflict in Georgia. Also, interstate cases have been brought to the Court. This will require significant attention and resources for many years, which further increases the need for reforms. Should the implementation of Protocol 14 remain in suspense, I believe the countries who want to see an efficient court and believe in the importance of it will have to move on and find another way forward. Increased coordination between international organizations on human rights and rule of law related issues is something the Swedish chairmanship finds important. Priorities have therefore been to have high-level meetings with the OSCE and the European Union during our chairmanship. And as mentioned previously, a high-level meeting between the Council of Europe and the OSCE was held on September 15th. Besides discussing Georgia and the action taken by the organization, the two chairs discussed cooperation between the two organizations and election-related issues. Cooperation with the United Nations is also important. A draft resolution on cooperation between the United Nations and the Council of Europe has been approved by the Ministers' Deputies and transmitted to the United Nations Secretariat, with a view to consideration by the General Assembly this autumn. The Swedish chairmanship will make every effort to ensure that the resolution is adopted through consensus. I would then like to bring up one issue close, I know, to your heart and to that of the Swedish chairmanship. It's about making rights real for young European citizens, those under the age of 18, the children who will shape our common future. At a high-level conference, Building a Europe for and with Children, towards a strategy for 2009-2011, organized in Stockholm in September as a chairmanship event, a future strategy for children's rights within the Council of Europe was discussed. The Chair's conclusions of the conference indicated 3 priority areas for Council of Europe action in the coming years: promotion of child-friendly justice, eradication of all forms of violence against children, and participation of children and their influence in society. Based on the conference conclusion, a strategy for 2009-2011 will now be elaborated by the Ministers' Deputies with a view to its adoption at the handover meeting between Sweden and Spain on November 27. The Council of Europe campaign, Raise Your Hands Against Smacking, was referred to extensively at the conference, where Queen Silvia of Sweden and more than 20 members of governments of our member states signed the postcards which symbolise the Council of Europe's commitment to eliminate all forms of corporal punishment of children. This is fully in line with this Assembly's call for making Europe a zone free from corporal punishment. It's about, again, making rights real for children in the same way they are made real for adults. Preparations are also being made for 2 other conferences which the chairmanship will hold. Firstly, a conference on protecting and promoting the rights of persons with disabilities in Europe towards full participation, inclusion and empowerment, which will take place on October 29-30 in Strasbourg, organized together with the Nordic Council of Ministers. Secondly, a conference on systematic work for human rights implementations titled Right Works. This will be held in Stockholm in the beginning of November. The Swedish chairmanship will, together with the chairmanship of the European Union, organise a joint event on October 10 to highlight the International Death Penalty Abolition Day. This is something we feel very strongly for, just as the Council of Europe does, and we have therefore made an effort to highlight this day during our chairmanship. The expectations of the international community for free and democratic parliamentary elections in Belarus were unfortunately not met. Yesterday's report from the OSCE and ODIHR is quite clear in this respect. The Swedish chairmanship adds its voice to those who sincerely regret that the Belarusian regime did not seize this opportunity to take further steps towards greater respect for democratic values and human rights. The elections in Belarus clearly demonstrate the need to continue to support democratic forces, free media and civil society in the country, and that the international community should strive to enhance engagement, dialogue and contacts with Belarus. The Council of Europe has an important role to play in this regard. We must also continue our efforts to contribute to a democratic development in Belarus in order to facilitate one day its membership in the Council of Europe. This summer we witnessed some very serious events in Turkey. The Constitutional Court in Turkey was investigating whether the ruling AK party had breached the constitution. The outcome of the decision was that the court did not ban the ruling AK party. It's important that this decision is followed up by the Council of Europe, as I believe the decision opens up for further reforms, also recalling Minister Bildt's invitation to the Turkish authorities to make use of the Council of Europe's expertise. The elections in the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia earlier on this summer showed worrying signs. Serious acts of violence and intimidations occurred even though the elections were technically well organized. It's important that we continue our efforts in assisting the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia in their democratic reforms and path towards the European Union. On October 15, presidential election will be held in Azerbaijan. The election is carefully being followed by the Committee of Ministers, and we hope that they will be carried out according to international standards. The elections will show whether or not the authorities are willing to follow international standards and norms, allowing free and fair elections. An important question in the near future for the Council of Europe as a whole, but in particular to the Assembly, is the election of a new Secretary-General. Finding a good Secretary-General who meets the Juncker criteria is important. And in order to initiate the process, Minister Bildt sent his colleague a letter in July asking them to begin the process of finding a new Secretary-General by identifying suitable candidates in their countries. Regarding Kosovo, Sweden stands by its commitments to ensure a steady and peaceful transition towards an independent state under international supervision. Resolution 1244 still applies, and the reconfiguration of the international civilian presence is now finally underway, initiated by the United Nations Secretary-General, and I can here only reconfirm Minister Bildt's and Sweden's position on this matter in his address to you in June, sincerely welcoming the transition from UNMIK to the ICO and to ULEX, involving all areas. Not all governments share this view, but a majority of the members of this Council do. In this respect, I'd like to emphasize the importance of enabling continued activities of the Council of Europe as well as the OSCE. Finally, I'd like to bring up the necessity to intensify the strengthening of the principles of rule of law in the Member States. A strategy on rule of law is being discussed in the Committee of Ministers. Hopefully it will be accepted during the Swedish chairmanship. The work on this issue has to take place in close cooperation with other international actors such as the United Nations, the European Union and OSCE. Rule of law was a thematic issue during the committee meeting in May, focusing on Southeast Europe, and is still a key concern. As members of the Council of Europe, we need to act responsible and safeguard the possibility of the Council of Europe. The role of this Assembly is pivotal and for our joint efforts to uphold democratic values in Europe. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your attention.